one of those guys who the people on his team love him. He has a vision for what he wants to accomplish, and hires great people who go do big things, as we get to see here. So thank you for joining us, Brent.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, John. So as John mentioned, Brett's built amazing company, amazing buildings. When I think of organizations that have a purpose beyond profits, that are mission-driven, nationally, I think of Whole Foods, Patagonia, Starbucks. Here in Columbus, Kaufman Development is one of the first ones that come to mind. So to provide some context, how do you define the mission or purpose of Kaufman?
Yeah, our purpose is to build high design communities around impact, creative expression, and well-being. And within all of that, there's a lot there that we unpack. But at the end of the day, it's with the intention that we're doing our part to change the world.
Maybe go into the specifics a little bit. When you started, what were you seeing as like, okay, this needs to happen, and where is that today?
Yeah, so the story, the background is that I spent a lot of my life, really, and certainly the beginning part of my career, working and being associated with things that probably weren't really me at my essence. And so that looked like going into banking, despite the fact that I was interested in psychology and architecture. I went and got a job at a bank to impress my girlfriend's parents, which worked because we've been married now 20 years, but I hated banking. And then I spent the next 11 years in a corporate culture doing production housing and really just not being inspired by my work and really not knowing the difference. I didn't have parents that grew up passionate, that loved their work. I just thought that's what you did. You went, you got a job, you worked, and then the rest of the things that you were passionate about, you did at some other point on the weekends, vacations later in life. So really, what the impact, the creative expression, the well-being, those are things that we're just passionate about. I wanted to create a company that I could go to work and have a work-life integration where volunteering in the community would happen during the workday. We would go for runs and talk about, what we were doing. And that not only would we have that within our company, a company full of people that shared that passion, but we would create communities that made it easily accessible for people to connect to their passions, to be inspired, to connect to not only the things they're passionate about, to other people that they could collaborate with and, go on to do great things.
So you mentioned integrating some of your interests into your work life. What are some of the specific interests you have? What are the things you want around you at work?
Well, in this project in particular, there's a lot of art. So art is always something that I've been inspired by and occasionally dabble in. And so, that's why you see a lot of the art. But it's not just about, when we say expression, creative expression, it's not just about art or the arts. It's about being fully expressed as a human being. So that's something that personally I'm really passionate about. Any kind of opportunity to grow and expand. So that might mean learning new things, whether it be acupuncture or nutrition, or, we're bringing in, last week or a couple weeks ago, we had a group in from Los Angeles that was doing kind of body fascia work. It's kind of anything that gives you the opportunity to feel better and to grow. So that's what we mean by expression. And that's an example of what I'm passionate about. And the same is true for the impact. Volunteering, the well-being is about being, healthy. That might mean we've got rooftop yoga or a lot of opportunities to learn and grow and expand and feel better.
I know one of your interests. I talked to a number of your friends before doing this interview, and they all mentioned meditation. Every single one of them. You talked about yoga and acupuncture. Meditation is one of those interesting things in the business world. 30 years ago, you did not see it in business literature at all. Now you read a Harvard Business Review, and every other article at least mentions it.
Yeah.
What does that mean for you? What's going on there?
Yeah, so when I was in college, this is a true story, sounds kind of cliche, but I saw a sign posted on a light pole for an introduction to transcendental meditation. And I went to the introduction, and I learned at the time that it was $500 to essentially get a word, which, they called a mantra. And I didn't really, at that point, it was like, wow, I don't think that's in the budget. So I waited. And when I graduated from college, I said yes and gave myself the gift of that word and that technique. And so what's happened for me since, in the 20 plus years since I learned to meditate is really like this. All of that, I credit, everything that's kind of become clear to me, everything that I've been able to create, the relationships that I have, the way that I feel, in part is due to learning that practice. And so, again, I've always tried, and this might sound a little selfish or narcissistic, but it's things that I've experienced that have worked for me, I want to share with other people. So creating an environment, a company where you had the ability to do the things you're passionate about and learn and grow. And meditation is one of those things that we brought into Kaufman Development, that we now bring into the communities that we own and operate. And, it's, I think, making a difference.
Do you think it makes you a better business person or more effective leader, or is it totally unrelated?
No, I think I'm pretty, I drank the Kool-Aid. I have just seen profound impacts in my life. And I don't think it matters what you're doing. If you're doing anything, you're going to feel better. You have more clarity. You physically feel better. You've got better ideas. You see the world differently. For me, it's been, really a profound practice.
You mentioned self-improvement. What are some of the specific things you're working to get better at right now?
Oh boy, I don't know that we have time. I will admit I am like a junkie.
Yeah.
So much so that I've kind of recently discovered that I don't need any more tools or any more ideas or any more networks, that I have more than I can actually implement. So I'm mostly focused on integration, really taking the things that I've learned and putting them into practice and mastering them. But I'm a big proponent of therapy. And so I do a number of different kinds of mental health therapies. And I'm constantly peeling back the layers and looking at my traumas and my childhood and my life and how I'm being and how I can improve. Landmark Forum, anyone in here do Landmark Forum? Yay. So that was a huge growth opportunity for me. I have a coach that I work with, and I'm learning how to coach. And so that's a real growth opportunity to be on the other side of that.
I think there's something about this space that overlaps with what you're talking about as well. Like when I walked in the doors here, my blood pressure dropped like 20% just being in this room. Gravity is extremely unique, even for the development work that you've done to date. Is this kind of a one-off sort of interesting concept, or are you all in on this going forward?
Well, it's a good question. So, the way I look at it is when we started the company, it was always with this in mind, but it didn't look exactly like this in my mind. So we started with our first project out in New Albany, which was a suburban stick frame, 2-story, 300 big unit project. And that project was still at the core the same, which was we wanted to create something that made a difference in people's lives. We wanted to give them access to a better life in some way, shape, or form. Now, it took on a different shape. So we got rid of the playground and we put it in a community garden. We started offering running clubs and fitness clubs. And this is maybe more common today, but it wasn't then. To have big amenities, events, programs, to be talking about wellness, to be talking about philanthropy. Those were not as common in the apartment industry for sure. So we've just been kind of enhancing that. We then went from suburbs to downtown, and we went from residential to mixed use, not just where you live, but where you work. So this has been an evolution of all of that. And really, I could tell you the Franklinton specifically, the art, there's traces of my childhood, walking into the art room for the first time when I was in high school and discovering the smokers in the pit. Like, there's like elements of my entire life that have informed my work. And this is just the latest, fullest expression of that. And it's something we're excited by. We're going across the street to Triple Down, and there's a lot more gravity we think that we can build from. And yet we're going to do other things too.
Can you talk about some of the new things you're going to do in the next iteration of Gravity across the street?
Sure. It's 5 acres directly across Broad Street. It's 250. There's a 256 unit residential tower, a 180,000 square feet office building. There's a co-living building, so we're going to try to tackle affordability and community in a different way with a co-living building, some townhouses, and really at the root of it is kind of a lot of what you see in the art and the placemaking and the experiential aspect of the real estate, kind of tenfold from what you see. So there's, 90,000 square feet of murals from artists all over the world that we've contracted. There's digital. I saw Brian here somewhere. Realm has done an incredible kind of digital forest, we're calling it, kind of modeled in part after the Digital Museum in Japan. So there's a huge interactive component. And then we're going to have bigger event spaces, more programming, more content, just an expansion of what we've got here.
I think you used the word evolution or journey to get here to kind of implement that vision. Do you have any regrets along the way or anything you take back?
I have a world view, which is that everything is perfect for what it is and what it's not. And so there's been a lot of mistakes and a lot of hard lessons, and it has not been easy. So, I spoke to a class at Ohio State yesterday morning, and I kind of flipped through all of our projects, and I didn't realize I was saying this, but somebody, of course, a 20-year-old at 8 o'clock in the morning will call you out on it. They said, so did all your projects go well? Have you had any hard times? And the truth is we've been in like a really good market and things have gone well and we haven't had any big problems, but it's been really hard and we've had a lot of hiccups. We've made a lot of mistakes. But to me, that's really, when you get on the other side of it, it's so powerful to have experienced all of that I don't see it as regret at all.
So when you're doing all of this, creating all these buildings, providing services, you have to leverage partnerships to make that happen. Maybe talk about how you see that. Maybe some specific, you mentioned Realm. Maybe go into that a little bit.
Yeah, there's a lot of people and partners that go into making something like this happen. There's the architects, the designers, the city, the lawyers, the investors, the co-developers, banks. There's a million people that kind of go into it from that perspective, and that's just the business we're in.
Yeah.
The partnerships that I think really allow Gravity to become what it is, and our company are more like our partnership with Bessa. Bessa was our first partnership. We were actually Matthew's first client and investor. And that is a partnership that we're really proud of. When I see that he's working with Jenny's and Big Lots and L Brands, that brings me so much joy because I know they're solving really, really big problems for a lot of people and a lot of corporations. So those are kind of the partnerships that we're trying to mine for. Pelotonia is a great example. Roosevelt, Rove, if you guys are familiar with Calvin and what his team is doing, that's a really great partnership we're proud of. We're really looking for partnerships that can really expand, scale, and have a big impact beyond just with our group.
So you've mentioned banks and financing a couple times, and construction is so heavily reliant on making those financial numbers work. When you're talking to investors or a bank, obviously you have to make the numbers work, but how do you convince them on the vision and focusing on purpose beyond profits?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. I was in a meeting, I can't remember if Brian was in this meeting or not, but I was in a meeting with a bunch of designers from around the country, and they were doing kind of really, big thinking. And I said, our superpower is that we make shit work. And they kind of laughed. And I said, no, I'm not kidding. Like, underneath all of this has to be really good, fundamentally strong real estate that will work, or else we can't live to see another day and dream big. So I've kind of looked back on that banking time in my life and all of that corporate production housing, all of that as much as it was something I didn't like at the time, really beneficial. I know when I meet with a bank what they want to see, what matters to them, and how to really make sure that we have fundamentally sound, economically sound projects. Because the truth of the matter is, I think that the world shifted, and talking about meditation and the benefits of that on our pro forma has gotten easier.
Yeah.
It's people get philanthropy and caring and some of the soft stuff now, yoga. I mean, these were things that you didn't really talk about with your banker 10 years ago.
Right.
Today they get it, but they don't really care that much about it. And even if they do, they don't care about it as much as they care about their credit committee and the underwriting
Right.
and the balance sheet. And so you just have to know that's it. That's how it is today. And maybe that's not even a bad thing. I mean, maybe, they're right. They might be right that it's just really important that things are fundamentally sound.
So in a couple of months, we'll be launching into a new decade. What do you think Columbus is going to look like over the next 10 years? And what role does Kaufman development play in that vision?
Well, I don't know. And I think that it's not clear. I think we're growing, and I think we're doing a lot of the right things. I think the city's headed in a really good path. And there are times, and I'm a bit of a snob, I will admit, that I scratch my head at some of the stuff that's getting built and some of the things that are being done. And I think it's okay, because overall I think we're doing a good job, and I'm pretty proud of this city, and I love being here, and it's been the best place to raise a family and grow a business. But I think our job, in part, and it's not just us, is to make sure that we continue to lean in to what's possible. And when I go to Austin and I go to Nashville and I go to LA, I'm not really that blown away most of the time. And I think that, we have the possibility of not just looking at Pinterest, but building the stuff that's on your Pinterest board, there's no reason why we can't. And that's what we're trying to do, is just do our part to keep building it in a way that we think benefits the city long term.
Okay. I want to open it up to audience questions, but before I do, I want to ask you one more question on the topic of leadership.
Mm-hmm.
I've met a lot of great people that work for Kaufman Developments. You seem to be doing something right in that area. What is it? How do you think about leadership development?
Well, I think that the first thing that I think we do, and maybe this is more of a culture than a leadership question, but I think it's pretty similar, is we hire for people that we believe in what we do and have the ability to grow and maybe lead. And so it's really less about kind of what we do. It's more about who they are that creates leadership. Now, that said, we invest pretty heavily in it. So we work with a company called Built to Lead. Chet Scott was my coach at my former company before we started Kaufman. He's part of the reason why I was able to come up with this idea of combining my work and my life. And we invest pretty heavily into our team. There's probably 3 or 4 different groups that are meeting with Built to Lead every week. We send our people all over the place. We implement a lot of tools. We, support the hell out of them in every way we can. And I think that seems to matter, and it's not because we want them to stay. We say, we want you on fire, whether you're here or somewhere else. And you know, there's nothing that makes me happier than when somebody leaves and they stop me on the street somewhere and say, you know, I'm on fire. I'm living my opus is what we call it. So, you know, it's just because we want people to love their lives, and that seems to create leaders internally too.
Brett, as Franklinton is developing, what do you think the city needs to do so Franklinton can work, stay as an arts community, still keep the residents, and not have what happened in the short north where there's no artists there anymore? What does the city need to do?
Well, it's a really good question and a tough one. And, you know, I think there's a number of things that can be done. So in the second phase, there's a difference between affordability and creating space for artists. Those can be attached, but not necessarily. So we are working with Homeport in the second phase. They're building an affordable housing project. We collaborated so that they could afford parking. We wanted to make sure that that was in the neighborhood. I mentioned the co-living. So our co-living project will be geared in part for artists. So you can rent a bedroom in a fully amenitized, brand new Class A for way more than the affordable housing units will be for way less than the affordable housing units will be across the street. And we will, inside of that space, have artists in residence, and we'll have art studios. And of the 90,000 square feet of murals, at least 70% of that will be done by local artists. Same was true here. So we are trying to do our part. And, you know, inevitably, things will not stay the same. They will change. And we don't control the entire neighborhood, and how the city or other partners, developers end up approaching their business is not in total control. But we are also at the same time working with the Columbus Foundation, GCAC, the city, others, to see how we might be able to ensure that placemaking, art, studios, et cetera, are here, and not just here now, here forever.
Do you need something like zoning protection like Providence, Rhode Island use so that the market doesn't work against your vision?
I don't think so. I'm not a big fan of that. I think, you know, you got to let people come in and do their thing. You know, some people will argue for a master plan, and I think, you know, my experiences, those are as good as the paper they're written on, you know. So personally, you know, what I think has happened here is the review board, the people that have been here a long time, Trent, others that are really, really passionate, have just been super supportive of stuff that they feel is honoring that creative energy. And they help you get through really fast. And if you're out of alignment with that, I'm hoping there's enough people here to make sure that doesn't happen. And I think there's been some projects in the neighborhood that kind of started out one way, and because people were really vocal about it, ended up a lot better. And I hope that's what continues to happen with us too. I want to be held accountable. I want people to call us out. And, you know, we may or may not listen all the time, but we want to hear it. Yes, Sam.
I'm going to try not to ask you anything hard.
Be nice.
What I want to know is, you touched on Built to Lead. How there's a whole lot more that you do with the team. Now, as people listen, they have their own teams. How would you emphasize that being on fire? Because a lot of people look at investing in your team internally as money going away. If they get better, maybe they're just going to leave. Can you reinforce why you put so much money into Chad and all of that, and what you see with the team?
No, it's a good question, and I give him some crap about that, because in our first meeting, I told him not to do this tonight, but I'm going to do it. In our first meeting, the first time I'm meeting Sam, I'm in a conference room with 3 other people, and he says he has a question for me before we start this business meeting. I'm with a coworker, and I said, go ahead, fire away, ask me anything. He says, have you ever done ayahuasca? So I will not answer that question, but I will answer your question, which is, look, I think that it almost doesn't matter if it works to me. People stay, leave, retention, if I had to look at that, which I'm not going to, but if I did, I would guess we've lost more people than we've kept. And I would guess that of the people we've lost, a small portion of them are on fire. But, we say it's for the few. That's I think, just how it is. It's really hard work to really face your fears and to be courageous and go do something that is inside of you. If it wasn't, everybody would do it. And it's for the few that make me never think about how much it costs. The truth is I get more fulfillment out of seeing people, even if it's just a little shift. And we've had enough years of doing this now that I know that people's marriages are better. People's relationships with their children are better. People are better because they were here and did that work. Whether they go on to work at a competitor or leave for a raise for $3,000 or start a new business and are on fire, if they moved at all. And it's an important thing. Gravity is not just for the meditators and for the muralists, and it's wherever you are. We want to meet you right there and see if we can move you a bit in a way that feels better to you. Like when I was at the bank and I got moved, I think there's nothing better than seeing somebody walk in here in a suit and tie, doesn't know anything about meditation, but they came because, their girlfriend or whoever, partner told them, come do this thing. And the next thing you know, there's they leave with a little something. That's why we do it.
You mentioned partners earlier, but throughout Bessa and some other ones, but didn't really go into any one. Do you have any stories for the people who don't know about some of those local partners who really resonated with you and your work and really helped in that collaborative?
Yeah, well, the Bessa story is really my favorite, and the story is that when I started the company, I had this experience where I was trying to get my kids to volunteer, and it was maybe even before I started the company, at a shelter downtown, and it was a real difficult thing to just volunteer. Couldn't get people to call us back. A lot of paperwork, it was faxed, it was a mess. And it was I can't believe I have to work this hard to help somebody. And so I thought, well, that must not just be me. So when we start the company and we open these communities, we want to be able to provide volunteer opportunities for our residents and for our employees. And we did that really poorly. We didn't know what we were doing at all. And one day, kind of as the universe does, Matt Goldstein walks into my office and says, I've got this idea. I'd like to really be able to offer corporations the opportunity to push of a button through a portal to be able to volunteer at any number of events in the city. And I said, that's great. What's the problem? He said, I need $5,000. I wrote him a check and here we are. So those are I would have paid him a lot more, and I have. But it's profound work, and that's the kind of partnership that we're really energized by.